It's a pleasure to be here this morning. My name is Shevlin. I'm GM in Europe for a company called IPONWEB. I've been looking forward to this panel intensely for the week now. So I'm not sure, would you like to maybe just quickly reintroduce yourselves? Or is that sufficient to kick things off?
I know Thomas changed the whole about Facebook, but you do work for Sky, right?
Me? Yeah.
Okay. Well, Leon, would you like to quickly?
Definitely. My name's Leon Siotis. I'm the Managing Director for SpotX for the UK and Southern Europe. For those who may not be aware, SpotX is, as of this week, officially owned by RTL, who are the largest European broadcast and entertainment company, owning a number of broadcasters across different countries, as well as content production arm in Fremantle, MCNs that run across Google and a number of other areas. So, yeah, excited to be here.
Very good. Paola.
I'm Paola Colombo. I'm General Manager of Publitalia, who is the sales house of Mediaset in Italy. And Mediaset is the biggest broadcaster in Italy and Spain, as Vincent mentioned.
Thank you. Jamie?
So I'm Jamie West. I look after our group advanced advertising strategy and implementation across all the territories we operate in.
And Jakob, I guess you've already introduced yourself sufficiently.
Entertainer, comedian.
In fact, a lot of the topics which we'll cover on the panel today, I think you've already begun to answer many of the questions that I have on my sheet. So thank you in advance for that. So let's start off with an easy start over 10, let's say. So addressable TV, perhaps Paola, just generally speaking, and the move, the relentless move into TV, which can be bought more in a more addressable fashion. Broadly speaking, do you see it having the ability over the coming years to add true value to Publitalia or Mediaset's business in Europe?
I do. We do as a company. So we recently launched a unit dedicated to advanced advertising last March, specifically for that. So we've been running addressable campaigns since 2016 on our pay TV offers through set-top box. So we've seen, we've tested at length the power and the value it can add. On the other end, we've run a number of researches. We have more than 800,000 questions that we've posed to users over the years. And we know that TV is absolutely effective. So for us, join the power, the effectiveness of TV for advertisers together, with the power of the addressability, with the real-time data you can get with digital that, cannot but add a lot of value to advertisers in the first place, but also to consumers who's going to receive a better advertising experience. So we definitely see as a great opportunity coming forward.
Okay. And is Mediaset's joint venture with ProSiebenSat.1 and TF1 your first sort of foray into developing technology to cater specifically for advertisers who are looking to buy addressably, or have you done some work already?
So we're gonna start with our OTT offering. So it's gonna be mainly digital to start with, but we are all working in our countries which are at different levels of development when it comes to connected TVs. So we are looking at that and putting that together. And what we have seen so far is that, besides gathering a revenue opportunity, which we believe there is in having more centralization of budgets from media agencies, from advertisers, but there's a tremendous value that we have seen in us sitting together and talking about technology. Also because we have now launched addressable TV on linear TV, on free TV channels. And it's been like a lot of work because our standards in Italy are different from the other ones in Europe. So there's a lot of work that we've put into that, a lot of effort. So imagine if that can be scaled across country. In this time when everything is changing so quickly, leveraging our scale also when we have to invest in technological development, when we have to define new standards, I think it's a great point of acceleration. So we see both sides of the opportunities. One is tech development, joint roadmap and focus, and the other one is, of course, commercial, the revenue generation opportunity.
Interesting. Thank you. Leon, I guess speaking of scale, and congratulations on the news this week that you've been fully closed on the RTL deal. And I was reading this week also that you've just announced a partnership with Voodoo in the US, which is on the face of it an enormous deal and partnership, potentially reaching 100 million devices, I think was the quote. In Europe, how do you see SpotX's role sort of across the sort of splintered ecosystem for addressable TV? And how are you guys addressing that from a technology perspective?
Definitely. Well, I think the entire, our entire platform has been built kind of from the ground up to work in this modern environment. So, we call it the modern ad server, and it's been built to work in, across all devices and multiple environments. And I think with the connected TV space, specifically across Europe, as Paola mentioned, every country's at a different level of its evolution. So at this stage, it's really about working with the individual broadcasters and the individual entities across those countries and delivering, kind of the products and requirements for their specific market. Whether we'll see, a kind of unified approach across every region, I'd say is still up in the air. There's a lot of, I'd say there's a lot of kind of built-in barriers at this stage at a country level that may not allow for exactly what's going to work in the UK to work in, Spain or Germany. But the good news story is that we are seeing, from a pure consumption standpoint, we're seeing a huge growth within the space, and therefore it opens up a wealth of opportunities for broadcasters and how they monetize, how they target, and the kind of different tools that they have at their disposal.
Okay, thank you. Jamie, Sky's revenue seems to continue to march forward across Europe, but in the UK in particular, with your partnership with Liberty Global and the Virgin channels. So you seem to be really making a mark in this market. And can I ask, have you evolved the specific offering based on the partnership with Liberty Global? Has Sky AdSmart evolved its feature set in terms of being able to offer return path data, for example, to buyers, or additionally enhanced targeting and so on?
So I think the proposition of AdSmart has evolved over time anyway. So in terms of targeting capability, there's thousands of attributes, fixed attributes that we can offer advertisers as well as custom segments. The key benefit, I think, for the partnership with Virgin is really with the advertiser and the agency in mind. Having a consistent currency, having consistent measurement, having consistent sales point and integration point, really benefits the industry as a whole. Jakob and the wider industry have constantly said, you guys need to work together and partner rather than have competing propositions. And that, I think, is the partnership with Virgin is a good example of TV pulling together to offer real flexibility in a medium that historically had only been known for broad brand building, fame building, campaign capability. And addressability for me, while not going to be the only route to market, and far from it, what it means for the UK and Europe is that TV can compete for more budgets against more media types, whether it be local press and local radio, through to search, through to direct mail and all of those sort of things. So, we're attracting sort of campaigns from the whole gamut. Almost 3/4 of the brands active on the AdSmart platform are new to Sky. So we're growing the TV market. And as we rolled out a year or so ago into Italy, we're seeing the same thing. We launched in Ireland earlier on this year, and we go to Germany in 18 months or so time. So, for us, it's all about having consistency in market across multiple platforms and consistency across Europe.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess that is a metric I know that Sky keep close track on. Is the number of new advertisers you can sort of bring in the door with the offering. Equally, I guess, with these sort of recent developments in terms of, for example, EBX and Sky, rolling out into Germany and other European markets potentially in the future, is there a changing appetite across the buying sort of ecosystem for specifically pan-European TV campaigns, be they linear or addressable, do you think?
I think the appetite is evolving. I wouldn't say it's a fully formed appetite because there's a number of challenges. There's challenges of, the client structure doesn't necessarily support it, the agency structure doesn't necessarily support it, and the media owner structure doesn't necessarily. But I would say, what we're seeing from Sky in particular is that we're starting to build direct relationships. That's not to the exclusion of the agency, but where an advertiser is sharing first-party data with Sky, aggregated, anonymised, GDPR compliant, but sharing data with Sky, they are wanting to have a tripartite conversation that includes Sky across territories and agency across territories. So we're seeing more and more, but it's not the majority of the business that we generate.
I see. Do you perhaps have a view on that also, Jakob?
Yeah,
in terms of what you
around
see?
the pan-Europe, I think Paola said it, everyone said it, that TV is very, very different from market to market.
Right.
And therefore the complexity of running in many different markets, we are probably early days in the addressable TV space, but I'm sure one day we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, right, because I saw just this week where the Italian regulator, for example, has placed new constraints on the number of hours you can have, which are not locally, which do not contain local content, which is a complexity, I guess, that really potentially hamstrings pan-European buyers.
In France, it's still not legal, right? You can't interrupt the broadcast stream, so it's what goes out to everybody. So it's until that changes.
Same in Germany, right?
Yeah, well, you've got like north-south, right? The split. So there's got to be regulation changes before you can really execute pan-European to the degree that I think people talk about from a digital standpoint.
Right. And do you think independent players are better placed potentially when that regulation change happens to, in terms of the toolkit that they offer to buyers, in terms of being able to capitalize on that complexity versus, say, the duopoly or the quadropoly, depending on how you view it? I guess that's an open question.
What's an independent? Is Sky independent, or is RTL independent? Or are we talking about none?
I guess.
Or are we talking about like a small startup that we haven't heard of that is going to create some?
Anybody outside of the big four, I guess, the GAFAs.
Clearly, I'm biased. I think that the broadcasters are best placed to deliver a solution. They know their industry, they know their world extremely well.
I guess my question maybe is more specifically relating to content. Is quality content and a verified audience enough, or will an evolution of technology and bespoke integration, for example, in localized markets, be necessary?
So from my perspective, I think we kind of get lost in the bullshit of technology and forget about the customer, whether they be the consumer that's viewing or the marketeer. And depending on which way you look at it, if you think about the marketeer, what they're looking for is effective advertising outcomes. They don't quite frankly care about whether it's delivered by Sky, ITV, Channel 4, or Facebook or Google, as long as it's effective. And from a consumer perspective, they're looking for the best content on the best platform, giving the best experience. So that means that as platforms and content owners, we need to focus on both ends. How do we service that client efficiently and effectively? How do we make it easier for people to transact? How do we make it easy for them to overlay their own data in a data-compliant way, if you're thinking about agencies and advertisers? And how do you make it easy to prove out efficacy or return on investment? Then on the consumer side, you just need to make it really easy for people to find the content they want to watch when they want to watch it. It's not more complicated than that.
Yeah, no, it's a valid point. And I guess maybe in the forefront of my mind here is Amazon above anyone else, given the wealth of data assets they have on both sides. But do you feel that, for example, EBX are Paola, getting into a position where they are creating those data assets readily enough for a demonstration of that return on investment in comparison, say, to an Amazon service?
So we are looking at our data. So we do have first-party data. We're never going to have the data that Amazon has. We are just playing like in a different field. We do, on the other hand, have localized content. We have a local presence that I think is not something to be neglected, because, going after what Jane was saying, we know how to connect with consumers. We've been doing that for years. We know exactly what they like, what kind of content to offer to them, and how they're going to look for it. Where I think the Amazons and the GAFAs have an advantage is in the data, if you want, and also in the way that they've been built to be consumer-centric. So the user experience sometimes they offer on their platform, it's hard for a broadcaster to recreate. So that's the evolution step we have to take now. But again, so we're going to be looking at data, but also we are looking at clustering our content, because we do believe there is a great power in the connection that content creates with the consumer. And we switch on a program. Last Saturday, we had a new program starting again after 8 years, and one out of 3 women in Italy was in front of TV watching that program. There's a great value, and you can imagine, the advertising experience for a consumer in this same framework is different from an ad delivered on somewhat content when they were doing something different. So that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah. Sorry, Jacob.
I think it starts with the consumer experience, and the consumer experience in rich environment on the big screen. Broadcasters have an awful lot of experience in doing that, and it's not just something you replicate in 12 months and learn a lot about, but it is something you can replicate over time. And it is something that the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazon, the Netflix, the Apples of this world can replicate. If they become strong content houses, they have great consumer experiences as well. We mustn't underestimate that. They're very big, they're very wealthy, and they are all building apps for the OTT environment, smart TVs, which then suggest they can build a TV experience as a broadcaster.
Yeah.
And if they learn to understand broadcast content as well as broadcasters, the industry will change dramatically. There's very little doubt about that, and we know that money follow eyeballs. From advertising perspective.
That's the point, right? And there's no doubt that if they execute well, they can potentially achieve the scale, which is encouraging, on the other hand, to see EBX, for example, having a potential reach of 250 million, I think it is, across European markets. But based on the complexity, I think, Jakob, that you outlined in your presentation, do you feel that trading models will have to change based on that complexity, or will you still, as a major, one of the largest buyers in the European markets, be able to sort of execute that single major TV trading deal?
We spend a lot of time thinking about that. Obviously, there are different dynamics. There are the dynamics that a lot of our clients can't afford to pay higher fees in the world of innovation and new things. And when you innovate and you develop new things, that's quite a costly exercise. So we need to figure out who pays for that. Right now, that's us, ourselves. That's one aspect of what is going to change in terms of the new world of TV, etc. That you will see changing, and our trading models, who we work with and how we work with people, will also change based on that.
Right. Is that something that concerns you, Jamie? Given, I guess, you're bringing on new advertisers, but they tend to be smaller buyers, right? In terms of.
So to be honest, I actively encourage it. We have a really varied trading model, ranging from the core brand building, traded in a certain way, but we've got deals where we guarantee we pay per household view, per impression, we pay on outcomes, we pay on revenue share, or they pay on revenue share. And so for us, it's about finding a way that works for the marketeer and the advertiser. So being flexible on how you approach the market, both technically and commercially, allows us to sort of take a step ahead and advance and learn hand in hand and aligned with the customer. And that for me has been probably one of the most exciting parts of the last 3.5 years in the UK and the last year in Italy, is understanding what is working and finding partners that you can have a trustful and commercially rewarding relationship with. So it's no longer about lowest common denominator price. It's no longer about a 3-second thumb swipe versus, a 30-second view. It's about what delivers an outcome, and let's share in the upside on the back of it. Clients love that.
If we look at how we worked with Sky 10 years ago, that's very, very different today. We're working in many, many different ways. We're working at many different models. We're working at many different initiatives. Sky is one of our biggest partners in the UK. We do that across. We do that with ITV, 4 and 5, and everyone else. So that's evolving quite a lot. And Sky will spend, as an example, Sky will spend more time educating our clients in this new space, because Sky is leading in the UK with their products, and therefore it's a very, very big advantage to take our clients on this journey, because this is new for clients. Imagine you've been spending the last 20 years, you are advertising TV money in one way. Then all of a sudden this really interesting product comes along that is really interesting. I haven't talked to one advertiser, and I'm sure you haven't either, talking about how interesting these products are. And then you go down and start talking planning. And then you talk to the clients of saying, well, if it's so interesting, let's move 20% of your spend into this area. And they start sitting differently on the chairs when you start using numbers like that. So the education in the market, Jamie and I probably, or the rest of you probably think that, we are halfway through this. We just started. We literally just started.
I mean, that's a really interesting point. And Jamie, you just activated what I guess used to be one of my favorite keywords, the impression, the good old impression, where you could just watch the dollars rack up as the impressions racked up. I guess it's sort of the reverse in a sense when it comes to TV. It's the fear of micro-targeting, which I guess a lot of planners are looking to avoid. And that, I guess, maybe is a nice segue into the topic generally of standardization around measurement. And we get back to the sort of the fragmented market in Europe, where we have a real challenge in comparison, say, in the US. In the UK, things are not so bad. Bob works reasonably well. The recent report by Videology was very interesting because it gave a nice sort of snapshot of the various challenges across the different European markets. How do we, as an industry, sort of pull together to ensure that we don't commit the sins of our digital past, where we have this horrible back-end syncing, cookie syncing mess, which has created so much pain and suffering for everybody? How do we move forward as an industry and prevent that happening when it comes to addressable TV?
So I'll go first. I think for me, there's a couple of things. First is transparency. You need to be absolutely clear on what you are selling, what the customer is buying, and what the mediation layer is. That for me is really important. We don't want to get into the murky world of arbitrage and all of that sort of thing. The second is independent auditing. So Sky have built out viewing panels in all of the territories, let me rephrase that. We're in the process of building out viewing panels in all of the territories that we operate in. In the UK, we've reached well in excess of 3 million households, giving us second-by-second viewing of every single programme spot, sponsorship, and promotional ident. And we have a third-party auditor verifying the data, verifying the capping and scaling that we're using. And so, we don't need and we don't want to fall down sort of the hole and that the likes of Facebook have fallen down, where I think it's their 13th accounting error, or the issue that YouTube have had of having non-safe environments. So I think what's great news is, as broadcasters and platforms, we're able to learn from other mistakes and make sure that they don't get repeated in a TV environment, because ultimately we have a brand safe environment that we now allow third-party tracking within set-top box and IP.
And to that point, Jamie, on the independent third party, the auditor, I mean, do you think that should be a single party or system which is shared and mutually agreed across all of the major broadcasters?
So I think that's a tricky question, because not everyone has the resource or the capability of building viewing panels. So we have gone, so we've used for our IP streaming and set-top box on demand auditing, we're using Moat for third-party verification across all platforms at the request of a large number of advertisers. For our larger viewing panels of linear TV viewing via the set-top box, we use RSMB, who are the auditor of Barb, who are seen as the gold standard. In some instances, we share that panel data. It costs us an awful lot of money to manage, run, operate, and audit that panel. But we're happy to work with any recommended auditor as long as everyone agrees.
Right. Okay. I guess we could go very deep on this topic specifically, I guess, but the challenge I have potentially with not necessarily with companies like Moat, but with third-party vendors in general, is that you have inconsistency in standards, and they don't always necessarily serve the interests of the buy side at large. And I guess I would ask the question, perhaps, and maybe Paola, you have a view on this. Maybe it's somewhere on the roadmap for EBX, but how do you serve the interests of companies that are putting the best foot forward, looking at how to really track and verify that they have reached their audience across these new fragmented channels, using machine intelligence and looking for independent verification, not necessarily from the digital third parties that we've seen up to this point?
Yeah, so I think on that, I mean, for ABX, we're all working in different market, and each market, again, is different also in digital, in their certification system. But I do think that if we want, addressability to become, to grow and be like a solid, we do need at least a market-by-market standard for measurement, as we do for pre-campaign measurement. So in Italy, for example, we have Auditor, we have Nielsen auditing data, and so when you forecast your TV buy, you do it on data that's certified and recognized for everyone in the market. So I do think you need post-verification layer that is similar, so that everybody is speaking the same currency. So what I've seen over the years is for viewability, post, in target evaluation, I've seen all sorts of things, as you mentioned. One measurement doesn't speak to the other, so it's very hard for the buy side, but also for the, the sell side to see your own performance going, 20 percentage point according to who is measuring.
Right.
And then your focus is not going anymore to building effective campaigns, but is in reconciling those numbers. So it doesn't make sense. And another point I think we need to focus, and we are focusing internally, is the measurement on effectiveness, because once you have clear what is working and what is not, all the intermediate measurements are less significant. So again, what I think TV was really successful in is proving that if you run a TV campaign, you sell. So if we are able to do the same with digital as well, and for addressable as well, then I think that's a clear focus. Also, if you want to go into more targeting, then you address your targeting to what is actually working, or not to what you think it might be working for your campaign.
Actually, I had a question for Jakob. In your presentation, you highlighted one of the kind of pillars was viewability and brand safety. I guess my question is, if you're only working on the large screen and only working with broadcasters, was that really a conversation that advertisers were having? Because it feels like you're pushing a digital kind of standard into a broadcast environment where you know that it's brand safe because the content's made by broadcasters and Ofcom approved, and it's viewable because it's on a large screen that you can't change tabs. I mean, you can go make a cup of tea, but ultimately it's there. So I'm just wondering, kind of why have that as a pillar when you're kind of in this new space?
That's a fair question, a good question. You can skip ads, obviously. I do that all the time, unfortunately.
Really?
But there are lots of different environments you watch TV in now and in the future. and we have many different players playing in the content environment. So I think today and what we will see in the future will change quite a lot, and I think it will be very, very important to keep focusing on that, because it's very easy for certain content, for certain publishers or broadcasters to start having dodgy content in, because they make money that way. So it's very important. Yeah, I'm not talking about
Sky.
I'm not talking about any big broadcasters. No, I sincerely would be surprised if we see that from any big broadcasters, which is partly your point. I think the other point I will make, partly about what you're saying, is that we are the biggest media buyer in most markets all over the world.
Yeah.
And we would like to have, if we take UK as an example, we would like a BARB to come up with the standard of everything, because then it won't just be on one thing, it'll be on everything else. There are a lot of complications of that. A lot of the BARB stakeholders are not necessarily agreeing on things. Dovetail has been, which is a great concept, which is BARB trying to go into this world, has taken about 500 years to get off the ground and is still not there yet. And so that's where we would like to go, because that's when money really starts flowing. Because it is very difficult for that advertiser who's done TV for their whole life to start going into this space if they can't measure the ROI. Rome wasn't built in one day, I think. So to Jamie's point, well, when Jamie does partnerships with Virgin, it's not just about Sky, it becomes about Virgin and things like that, which is a fantastic initiative and helps us. It doesn't solve everything, but if that's how you started and then you build more and more partners on in the UK, that's what we see as a very, very important ecosystem to be built, however that's going to be built. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure how much time we have left. Great. A few more questions. Does anybody here support or buy against HDDTV standards?
HBBTV?
HBBTV.
Yeah, well, we actually, so again, there's a sister company called SmartClip that have a fantastic addressable TV product that's built on HBBTV. So it's a great kind of data platform as well as kind of ad insertion layer. So it's, a growing space. Germany, there's really high penetration, so, an exciting, area there.
And potentially high reach in all European markets.
Well, this is it. So we're starting to get a sense of what that is, and I think Italy as well as the UK are now adopting it as a full standard going into 2018. So you're seeing kind of TV manufacturers. So it's definitely an exciting space from a distribution standpoint, right? It gives standards that perhaps weren't there before, and meant it opens up the walled gardens a bit, right? You're not necessarily as dependent on a set-top box that you may have been prior to that.
And could potentially over time be an interesting foundation for something like you described, with BARB, right?
Yeah, we before you bought them, we looked at them as well, and they're smart people and they have some smart technology, but I think we have to define. We wouldn't define HBB TV 1.0 as addressable TV. There's something called 1.5, which is smelling a little bit more like it, but it's only really when you get to 2.0, which, by the way, every market is different. Doesn't exist at any scale in the UK. It's relatively big in Germany. You know more about it than me, so. Which is just an example of how complex it is, but
I think the ad serving solution is kind of irrelevant. It's actually making sure that you have a consistent execution however you serve the advertising, whether it be our set-top box, whether it be by HBB connected TV or whatever. And in our current forecasts at Sky, we think well over 60% penetration for addressability, household penetration, by 2018, 2019, end of 2018, early 2019.
Interesting. Okay.
But theoretically, you're absolutely right. But practically, the more different technology companies out there, the more difficult it becomes for someone like us. So yeah, you're right. Technology shouldn't be the key theme of these things, but the more technologies that are used in different ways, the more complexity there is.
Yeah, so just from a Sky perspective, what we're focusing on is building out a mediation layer that allows people to transact whatever platform you see Sky or our media partners' content on, whether that be on Freeview, whether that be on Virgin, Sky, connected TVs, UView, those sort of platforms. Work out how we can serve ads as a single campaign across multiple platforms. Yep. So it's a single integration point. Yes, if you have multiple sales points, that's where Finecast comes into its own. But I think we're very clear about what we need to do. Make it easy for people to trade, make it easy for people to track, and make it easy to prove out efficacy. If you do those three things, you kind of got onto a winner.
Yep, I would agree with that. I saw one of your colleagues, Jamie, at the recent ATS event in London, where he very eloquently spoke about, he put a very positive spin on regulation, shall we say, and that in this current sort of climate of nasty environments where ads show up where they shouldn't, and so on and so forth in the digital space, that actually regulation in TV is a good thing.
Yep.
Do you agree with him, firstly?
I mean, yeah, to Jacob's point earlier, what better environment do you have in the most, than TV? It is brand safe, it's premium quality content, and it's a really engaging sort of environment as a consumer to be involved in. So for an advertiser, you have that trust from point one. We across all territories have multiple different layers of regulation that we have to adopt, whether it be GDPR across Europe or whether it be broadcast regulation in each territory. For me, it's just a confidence stamp. It's a kite mark for TV against questionable, whether it be terrorist or sexual content. It's something I celebrate, embrace, endorse, and push forward on.
Yeah. Is that a view held by the rest of the panel?
I think if you look at, I'm coming from a digital background, so going into TV, you realize how much regulation is into your daily life. And to your question earlier, when OTTs that would come to the broadcast space, the broadcaster space, they need to start to adapting to all this regulation. It's not an easy game. It's one thing is to be born and structured for it. It's another thing to start walking in. And it's not to have an ad that is not compliant on TV at a certain time. That is just not acceptable. It cannot happen. So you have to change completely the way you work. So.
I think one of the best things for TV in terms of regulation is GDPR, which sounds a bit odd to everyone else in the room. But anything that is going to stop a questionable mediation layer, harvesting data, stealing data and building out their own data management platforms is an absolutely positive outcome for TV and TV platforms and advertisers, because it's a corrupt business to be operating in. And so the world that we are trying to build, both at Sky, I know ITV and Channel 4 in the UK, and RTL in Germany, are building out worlds where they can harness their own data, share it in a data-compliant way, but not allow it to be used, stolen, abused by third-party.
But it's a balancing act, right?
Absolutely.
We want to ultimately improve the advertiser's lot, allow them to demonstrate efficacy and so on. But take the point. Okay, I think we're almost out of time, so very, very quickly, can I ask each of you where you see the TV landscape in 5 years' time? Jakob.
We think that the addressable TV, the way we talk about it now, will obviously evolve. That could be about 30 to 50% of the total TV market, and we see in 5 years' time we're going towards numbers like that. We think we have gone through 5 years of lots of complexity, but we will hopefully have created standards across the industry, partnerships across the industry that will make it less complex. Obviously, I'm not 100% objective here. That's part of what Finecast wants to do. Sure. Whether we can achieve it in a fairly short time frame of 5 years, that can be challenged, but we want to go towards that.
Jamie?
5 years' time, I'm a consumer. I've got more choice than ever, better quality content than ever. As an advertiser, I'll have more data integrations, more transparency, and more effectiveness.
Thank you. Paola?
So definitely for us in Italy, 5 years' time is a significant time period because in 2022 there will be a change in transmission standard, which entails a switch off, and so we will see flourishing smart and connected TVs. So definitely from a consumer standpoint, you can access the content you want whenever you want it at scale. So anything you want to watch. So it's a more user-centric. I do see, competition is going to create more qualitative content, and that's a healthy thing for the consumer. And, addressability and good measurement will have made for advertiser TV advertising more effective. So we say it's a new good time for TV.
I think we'll see a kind of further blurring of the lines between traditional linear and OTT, where to a point a consumer, maybe not in 5 years, but a consumer won't even acknowledge the difference between the two as to what they're watching, right? They could turn on their TV and whether that is being delivered, via kind of your public internet, and therefore, well, linear doesn't matter to them ultimately, but it does enhance kind of the opportunities on the back end as to what you can do there. So I think blurring of the lines, meaning blurring of the consumer experience, is a good thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, panelists.
Thank you.
Do we have time for questions, or are there any questions from the floor? Yeah, sure. Do we have any questions from the audience?
There aren't any.
No? Well, that means, I guess, you have done a very good job. Thank you very much.